everyone, welcome to this demo on how to set up your camera for class. I'm going to go kind of quickly because I know that some of you already know how to set up your camera, but I think it will be helpful to review some of the things that we're going to cover. And you might have a different camera from last year, or you might get one of the brand new cameras, or you got your own. So it will be helpful to go through this, so just bear with me. I'm going to walk you even through the basic steps, even of how to put your battery. On this cameras, there are the Canon Rebels. You have the battery at the bottom, so you have to pull that to take this out. Make sure that when you're putting it in, you're putting it the right way. You have an arrow that shows you where to put it on. You also have that in the charger, so when you're putting your battery to the charger, match the arrow. The card is the same that the other cameras. You press it, pulls the card out. Make sure that you put it in this way, so the back of the camera with the card looking. If you're unsure of how it should go in, you can look here and it will tell you how you should put the camera in. If it doesn't go in, and don't force it, it probably is the other way. You should know that by now. So once you put your card in and your battery, make sure that your camera is set to manual. For this class, we're going to be shooting on manual, so make sure that you're in manual right there. We're not going to be changing lenses, but if you're curious on how you change the lenses, you press right here and you rotate this and the lens will come out. Okay, every lens comes with a little dot, either red or white, depending if it's a lens for a crop sensor, they're white. If it's a normal EFS lens, it will be a red dot, so you match it with that. So you basically have to match the color. In this case it's white, so you match it, you put it in, and then you rotate until you hear the click. And again, to take it off, you have to hold this down while you're rotating. So those are like basic things about the camera. The other thing is, make sure that your lens is set to on the stabilizer and also on the autofocus, because that's going to help you out when you're focusing. If you press your shutter and nothing is happening, it's because this is on manual focus and it's not focusing. So make sure that that's on. So now that we have our camera on manual, we have our lens autofocus on and stabilizer and our battery and card, we're going to go ahead and turn it on. The first thing that is going to pop up if you have never set up your camera is basically the date and time. I recommend that you do that because it's going to help you out, figure out what day you shot your picture, and it's going to be useful, particularly later on. I'm going to skip it just so we can go faster, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel, approve that, and I'm going to walk you through the steps of what's the first thing that you should do to your camera. The first one should be go to menu and make sure that you wipe out the card. So on the top, we're going to navigate all the way to this wrench that has like a mustard color, and we're going to go down on the menu to where it says format card, and you're going to press the middle one. Once you press that, it's going to ask you again, like, you want to format it, so you have to move it to yes, okay. And what that will do is basically wipe out your card completely. This is the way that you should format and wipe out your card, not deleting the pictures in the computer. That's not going to really erase everything. So this guarantees that you're starting with a new fresh card. So that's step one. Your step two is going to be navigating all the way to the first option, which has a camera with a red color background. And you're going to go to image quality and change it to raw. So to do that, you're going to go here. Probably yours is going to be under large for JPEG. So we're going to change it to raw. So you keep hitting the side here on the wheel until you get to raw, and you're going to press set. Okay, so make sure that you have that on raw. So that's basically going to be the format that we're going to be shooting on for this class. Now you have that on raw. You formatted your card. Now we can go ahead and press menu again to go out of the menu, and then you're right here in the view. I'm going to review the exposure just because I don't know what camera you used before, and I want to make sure that you guys know how to use it. These cameras. All of you have Canon Rebels. Now there are different models that might have the settings in a different location, so just make sure that you look at what I'm talking about so that way you can find it in your camera. One of the ones that I remember is the ISO in some of the cameras is back here. In some other cameras is on the top right here, okay? And then some other ones have the menu like on the corner here, but most of them are on the back, so you should be able to find it. The only one that's in a different location, I think, is the ISO, which is on the top. So now that you have your camera on, if you press your shutter halfway, right, this turns on. And what I'm going to be reviewing is what should be the steps that you should set up when you're doing your exposure in your camera. The first thing that you should identify is what location you're going to be shooting. And there are two things that you have to change. First, it's going to be the ISO. So if you're shooting indoors, if you're shooting outdoors, so you have to know that. And if you're shooting outdoors, remember that it's going to be 100 or 200 probably. Okay, you can go all the way to 400 if you want outdoors, depending on what exposure you want for your shutter speed and f-stop. But I would start with the lowest number possible. Okay, that's how you should be working always when you're taking pictures. Start with the lowest ISO, and if you need to go higher, then you go higher, and you keep working your way up. I don't recommend that you go higher than 800. Okay. If you can work on 400, work on 400. If you really, really, really need to, then you go to 800, okay? There are going to be occasions that you're stuck because it's dark, it's at night, and you're shooting in an alleyway, and you have no options, then you can go to 1600. But remember, try to keep it lower than 800 always, okay? That's going to help you out your pictures so they look nicer and more crisp, and you don't have that much noise. And I'm going to go over what that is in class. But for now, the one thing that you have to remember is that the lower the number, okay, the ISO number, less sensitive the sensor is, okay? So you want to keep that lower if you can, so that way you don't create a lot of noise in your image. So I'm going to put it in 400 because I'm indoors, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now the next step is you do your ISO. One thing that you should learn how to do is change the white balance, which is this icon right here. And you have all these options. You have daylight, shade, cloudy or overcast. You have tungsten, fluorescent, flash, and custom. Okay, so depending on what light environment you're in, you should be able to know and change that here. If you're unsure, just leave it in auto white balance, because I'm going to explain in class, because we're shooting raw, you can actually change this in post-production really easily. So you can leave it in auto white balance for now, but just know that you have the option of changing it here. Okay, now the next step is you have your ISO, you have your white balance. Now I recommend, it's not like a rule, but I recommend that you figure out what's going to be your shutter speed first, okay? The reason is you guys are going to be shooting hand holding your camera, so knowing what shutter speed you're at is going to be very important to make sure that you don't have camera shake, okay? So I recommend that you're at 125 or higher for hand holding your camera. Some people shoot at 1/60. I just rather be safe than sorry and make sure that you are in a shutter speed that definitely will not create any motion. Sometimes 1/60, if you're moving or you're doing something, like it might come out blurry. So I recommend that you're higher, okay, at 1/25 or higher. Depending if you want to freeze an action of somebody like jumping or something like that, you definitely want a higher shutter speed. But if you're unsure, just start 1/25, okay? And then you can modify from there depending on what you need for your f-stop and your ISO. Okay, so that's basically what you're going to change. And to change that in your camera is by default, and you just move this wheel right here on the top to either side, okay? And you'll see that it will go lower or higher. Now to change it to the f-stop, you have to press this one that says AV, and it has a symbol of plus and minus. You have to hold it, and then it will go to the f-stop. If I let it go, it goes back to your shutter speed. So hold it down, and then move the same wheel, and then you have your f-stop. And remember that the f-stop controls the depth of field. So if you want a very blurry background, you need a low f-stop number. If you want a very deep depth of field, then you want to make sure that your f-stop is really high. Okay, so all of these options are going to affect how your picture is going to look. So you have to learn how to combine them so that way the picture looks how you want. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to make sure my shutter speed is 1/125, you know, my f-stop. But what is all this going to do is basically it's going to be influenced by your light meter. So your light meter is going to be your best friend. It's this one right here on the bottom. Right now it's not activated, so to activate it, you have to press your shutter halfway. And once you press it halfway, the light meter will get activated, and you will see a little dot that's going to blink. After a little bit, it will go away. So you have to make sure that you press it, and then you can start moving your shutter speed or f-stop, and it will keep the light meter there, okay, as long as you're moving it. So it won't go away unless you stop moving it. So right now, I'm going to make sure that I'm at 1/125, which is here, so that's where the other. So I have to lower my f-stop. So now I lower my f-stop to get close to 0. Okay, that's the goal, to be as close to 0. Sometimes you want it a little bit over, sometimes a little bit under, depending on how the picture looks. So you have to make sure that you understand that the light meter, it doesn't have to be always at 0. That's just an aid for you to identify what will be a good exposure. But depending on what's on the scene, sometimes you want to overexpose, sometimes you want to underexpose a little bit. So once you get that to 0, let me get mine to 0. Okay, I see that I have 1/80 at f4, 400 is at 0, so that will do a good picture right there. But what if I have, 100 ISO, and I'm right there, and you will see that it's underexposed, so I need to lower my shutter speed. But then if I go too low, I can't shoot hand holding anymore. So I have one option. I can lower my f-stop, but you know what? I'm at the lowest number, so I'm stuck. That's when you go to your ISO and then raise it, so that way you can get to a good exposure. Okay, now I can raise my shutter speed to get to 0. So 1/100, I can get away with that. Okay, so that's the combination of your shutter speed, f-stop, and ISO, and then your light meter. It's really important that you understand how those three work. Shutter speed control blur or motion, f-stop controls how deep or shallow the depth of field, and the ISO how sensitive the sensor is. All of those things are really important, but I recommend that you start with the ISO, knowing if you're shooting indoors or outdoors. Set that up, then identify if you are shooting with a tripod or not, so that way you know what shutter speed you need to be at, and then at the end decide how much depth of field you want. And if you need to adjust any of these two because of the f-stop, then you go ahead and do that. Okay, so that was basically your ISO, white balance, shutter speed, and f-stop. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the other settings. Right here you have one that is basically the self-timer, so it's a little clock symbol. If you press there, you have the option of taking a burst, so that way it will take multiple pictures per second if you keep holding it down. Then you have the self-timer, which you guys are going to need for your picture of self-portrait, and this one is the one that you're going to use because you want the 10-second one, so that way you have time to walk in front of the camera and take pictures, and you're not like tripping over because you're rushing with the one that's 2 seconds. This one works great. It's 2 seconds. If you have the camera on a tripod and you want to make sure that it doesn't move while you're pressing it, then you want to use that one. Okay, but for your self-portrait, you probably want to use this one right here, and you just press set on the middle and it will approve it. Okay, so that's the clock symbol. White balance, we've already talked about how to get to the menu. The display, basically you can turn it off by hitting display, or you can turn it on. You can also hit this camera symbol to basically shoot live, so you can see it here. If you hit it again, you'll have to look to the viewfinder to see your pictures. When you're in live view, you also have a couple options here. If you hit display, you have the histogram, which is going to be also another best friend that you can have to basically assess how is your picture deconstructed in light. If you look at this, basically the image, you can tell that it's dark because the graph is all the way to the left. So pure black is on the right, pure white is on the right. You want basically this as close as possible to the right without touching it. So for example, if I move back, you can see now there's more light. This is a good exposure right there, okay? Nope, it went away on me. So that's a good exposure right there on the graph. So that's basically what you want to see. If you hit display again, you can turn it off completely, so it's just like the picture. So that's basically the different options. Or if you want to see only the shutter speed, f-stop, and light meter, that's kind of like the basic information, or if you want more. Okay, and once you're in this mode, you can press Q, so you can change some of the settings like ISO and some options that you have here. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. To see the picture, you hit play. Right now I don't have any picture, and you can zoom in by pressing the plus or minus to make sure that your picture is focused. Talking about focus, let's talk about how we're going to do that. When you have your camera on, right here on the back, there is a star, and then right next to it there's like a little cross made up with dots, and that's basically to pick your focusing point. So to do that, you're going to press here, and you're going to see this manual selection. If you move this wheel on the top, you can basically scroll through them. So if I have them all where they look orange like that, or kind of mustard looking, that means that the camera is going to set it up automatically. And how that works is it will focus on whatever is closest to the camera. Okay, whatever is closest to the camera will focus. So if you have a person, it can work really good because then it will identify, oh, that's close, so you want it focused there, and then the background will not be the focusing point. Now, there's times that the camera gets crazy because it's a busy background, or if you're shooting in a landscape and there's like mountains and there's a sky, it might focus on the background by accident. So if that happens, you want to make sure that you go to manual, okay? And basically, you can select what focusing point you want from all of these, okay? And once you set that up, you basically put it on top of the person when you're looking through the camera, and then when you press halfway through your shutter, it will just blink on that area that is being the focus. The way that I shoot, and it's not that that's the best way, it's just the way that I got used to, I usually have mine on the middle, and what I do is, once I have it on the middle, I would, let's say if I want to focus like somewhere right here, right at that point right there, I will set up my camera, put the shutter speed halfway, right? So you can focus on that point on the middle. And then without letting go your finger, I just reposition my camera and then take the picture. Okay? And what you will see on this one right here, even though I have my focusing point on the middle, it ended up on the side here on the bottom. The reason is because I hold the focus on that spot without letting it go and then position the camera and then press it hard. Okay? So basically that focusing point was held where I had it on without letting it go. If you let it go, it will get loose and you have to redo it. Okay, so you hold it down, you recompose, and then you press hard. I just like shooting like that because I like having control of where exactly I'm going to focus. I also sometimes don't have it on the middle, and I put it like exactly where I want. If I'm shooting somebody in the corner, I put it there and then I shoot. So I sometimes have it in different areas, but if I don't know where my focus is going to be because I'm just shooting street photography or something like that, I usually keep it on the middle and then, you know, focus on and then move it really quickly. So that's the way that I shoot, but it's not that it's the best way. It's just the way that I got used to. I would suggest that you try all of them. I suggest that you try with, you know, out of focus and then try to also do it one where you're like focusing on the middle or some in the air, so see what is better for you, and then you get a sense of what works, okay? So that's that one. And remember that to do that, when you're doing this, you're moving the wheel on the top, okay, to pick it. But you have to make sure that your camera is in out of focus. If it's a manual focus, it's not going to focus for you, okay? You have to make sure that it's in out of focus and you press it halfway. So those are some of the settings that I wanted to go over. We learned how to format the card, how to change it to RAW. We learned how to change your shutter speed, f-stop, ISO, how to read the light meter. Learn how to see your pictures by hitting play and zooming in to make sure that you can confirm that the picture is focused and sharp. Okay. You learn how to see the display, so you can see the histogram, so you can see if the pictures is well exposed. Okay. Some other settings that I do, for example, when I go here to the menu, I will explain those on class, but there are more options that we can basically change here, like custom white balance. You have also the color space. I like having it in Adobe RGB, but I will go over that later on in class. I just want to get you guys shooting with the basics of how to use your camera, okay? So the main thing is making sure that you're in manual, that you know how to change your shutter speed, f-stop, ISO, so that way you can get a good exposure, and how to use the light meter, okay? If you guys have questions or I forgot something, I'll let you know in class if I forgot something, but if you want to learn something that I didn't went over, please let me know and I gladly will answer your questions. This is just an intro to get you guys going. We're going to learn a lot more fun stuff later on. So I'll see you soon, and thank you very much.